Because polynomial functions are smooth and continuous, there's no gaps or anything like that. If the function graph changes from a negative x value to a positive, no, I meant y value. If the graph goes from a negative y value to a positive y value or vice versa, so like here's my axes and here's a graph. So let's say I've got a polynomial function, da 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 da. So if my polynomial function goes from a negative y value to a positive y value, then there has to be a 0 in there somewhere. So there's a positive y value, and there's a negative y value, which means there has to be an x-intercept, right? But we call that a 0. So if our polynomial function goes from a negative to a positive y value or from a positive to a negative y value, the intermediate value theorem says there has to be a 0 in there. There has to be. There's no way to get from negative to positive without going through 0. That's all this intermediate value theorem is saying. Okay, so let's go ahead and use this to show that there is a 0 between 1 and 2. So here's the function, f of x equals x squared minus 2, and we are going to use the intermediate value theorem to prove that there is a 0 between x equals 1 and x equals 2 for this function. Okay, so all we have to do to prove that is plug in numbers. So if we plug in 1, we get 1 squared minus 2, which is negative 1. That's our y value, right? That's a negative y value. And then let's do f of 2. 2 squared minus 2 is 2, right? Because 2 squared is 4. And 4 minus 2 is 2. So that's a positive y value. So according to the intermediate value theorem, our function graph cannot just jump from a negative value to a positive value without there being a 0 in there somewhere. There must be a 0 between those two numbers because it has to cross the x-axis. It must cross the x-axis. So that's all that's to the intermediate value theorem. Don't make it harder than it is. It's just a little way to prove that you have a 0 somewhere, which can come in handy when you're doing other things. All right.